I want to tell you about a man. Not a celebrity. Not a billionaire. Not someone you'll ever see trending online. But he changed my life. And if you listen, really listen, he might just change yours too. Because this isn't a story about winning. It's a story about refusing to lose. It's not about talent. It's about heart. About standing in the fire and saying, I'm still here. See, I've been broken. I've been addicted, lost, humiliated, laughed at. I've looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the man staring back. And during one of the darkest moments of my life, I met someone. He didn't give me money. He didn't give me advice. He didn't say anything heroic. But he lived like a warrior. Quietly. Relentlessly. And what I saw in him, it rewired something in me. He had every reason to quit. Every excuse to stay down. But he didn't. He got up. Again. And again. And again. And when I watched him do that, I thought, if he can survive his storm, what's stopping me from surviving mine? This isn't some fairy tale. It's real. Raw. Brutal. But true. So listen closely. Not because it's my voice, but because it might just be yours. And if you've been on the edge, if you've ever thought about giving up, this story is your reminder. You're not done yet. Not even close. He wasn't always strong. In fact, the first time I saw him, he looked like the most broken man I'd ever met. No fire in his eyes. No pride in his posture. Just a quiet kind of pain, the kind you don't need to explain. He had just lost everything. His wife gone. Car crash. Instant. Left him standing there with a 6-year-old daughter and a house full of silence. You know the kind of silence? The kind that presses down on your chest until you can't breathe? That's what he woke up to every day. And the world? It didn't slow down for him. It didn't stop to say, hey man, are you okay? It did what the world does. It kept moving. He lost his job 2 weeks later. Not because he was lazy. Not because he made a mistake. Because they needed someone fully available. And he had a daughter. A daughter who cried herself to sleep every night. Who clung to his shirt like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. He sold their furniture to buy groceries. He canceled the electricity to pay for her medicine. He pawned his wedding ring to keep her in school. But here's what shook me. He never complained. Not once. No bitterness. No pity. No why me. Just movement. Every day he got up, made breakfast with whatever he had, walked his daughter to school, smiled at her like everything was fine, even when it wasn't. Because that's what warriors do. They bleed behind the scenes. They cry in silence. But when it's time to show up, they do. And if you think that's weakness, you've never had to hold someone else together while you're falling apart. He told me once, I don't have time to break. She needs me too much. That hit me. Because how many of us crumble under far less? How many of us stop the moment things get heavy? He didn't. And not because he was fearless, but because he was needed. And sometimes, that's stronger than fear. That was the beginning of his battle. Not some Hollywood comeback. Not a miracle. Just a man. A father. With every reason to quit. And no intention of doing it. There's a moment when the world doesn't just knock you down now. It kneels on your chest and dares you to breathe. That's where he went next. The job interviews? Nothing. No one wanted a widower with a part-time schedule and no college degree. The savings? Gone. The help? Never came. The friends? They stopped calling when things got uncomfortable. And then, they lost the apartment. One missed rent turned into 2. One letter on the door turned into a final notice. One afternoon and everything they owned was in a trash bag. I remember seeing him. Sleeping in a 20-year-old Honda Civic, his daughter curled up in the back seat. Wrapped in a coat that was 2 sizes too small. It was winter. Let that sink in. While the world scrolled, posted, laughed, moved on. This man was counting coins to buy oatmeal. This man was brushing snow off a windshield at 6 a.m. just so his daughter wouldn't wake up cold. He never told her the truth. He made it a game. Said they were camping in the city. Said the Civic was a spaceship. And every night, when she asked if they'd go home soon, he'd smile, lie, and say, of course. You know what kind of strength that takes? To be dying inside and still be someone's hero? He was skipping meals so she could eat. Sleeping upright so she could stretch out. Washing up in gas station bathrooms just to walk her into school clean. And then it got worse. She got sick. Flu turned to fever. Fever turned into bronchitis. He had no insurance, no address, no one to call. I swear to you, he almost lost her. But even then, he didn't give up. He sat by her side in the free clinic for hours, holding her hand, whispering stories, promising her the stars. Not because he had them, because he refused to let her see the darkness. And in that moment, I saw something I'll never forget. He wasn't surviving anymore. He was fighting. Not for comfort, not for peace, not for dreams. For her. For one more day, one more laugh, one more breath. That's real strength. It's not what you lift. It's what you carry and keep walking. And while most people crumble under pressure, he carried the weight of a collapsing world and never stopped moving. So if you're listening right now and you think you're at your limit, I want you to hear this. He was lower and he got back up. So can you. Comebacks never start with applause. They start in silence, with no one watching, no one cheering, just one quiet decision. I'm not done. He made the decision at rock bottom. One cold morning, he looked at his daughter sleeping in the back seat of their car. And he whispered, "We're not staying here." He didn't know how. He didn't have a plan. But he had a promise. And that was enough. He walked door to door asking for work. Not a job, just work. Cleaning floors, hauling trash, scrubbing toilets. Anything. Anywhere. He landed a night shift mopping at a 24-hour diner. Minimum wage. No benefits. No respect. But he showed up. Every single night. And while others complained, he worked. Quietly. Relentlessly. And when the shift ended, he didn't go home because he didn't have one. He sat in the back seat of that car, his daughter still asleep. And he drew. Yeah, he drew. Little comics. Silly characters. Scenes of joy, laughter, magic. For her. Every day he left one on her pillow. A tiny sketch folded into a note. Today will be better. She believed him. Because he believed in her. That's what people don't understand about strength. It's not always loud. Sometimes it's a whisper in the dark. A scribbled drawing. A cold cup of coffee at 6 a.m. And the decision to try again. One night, while cleaning the diner kitchen, the manager walked in and saw his sketchbook lying open. He flipped through it, stopped at one page, then looked at him and said, "Did you draw these?" That one question changed everything. He didn't even know how to answer. He hadn't heard praise in years. The manager smiled and said, "You ever think about being an illustrator?" He laughed, not out of joy, out of disbelief. "I'm just the guy who mops the floors," he said. But that night, something clicked. Maybe he wasn't just anything. Maybe he was something more. And that's where it begins for all of us, isn't it? Not with success, but with a possibility. A door you didn't expect. A light you barely noticed. A single voice that says, "You're not invisible." He went home that night, if you can call a car home, and drew until the sun came up. Not for money, not for fame, but because for the first time in a long time, he remembered who he was. And when you remember who you are, the world doesn't stand a chance. Momentum is a strange thing. It doesn't come crashing through the door. It whispers, it knocks softly, and asks if you're ready. He was ready. After months of cleaning floors and drawing in silence, the manager from that diner made one call. A friend of his worked at a small health clinic. They were rebranding, looking for a few simple illustrations to cheer up the kids' wing. Nothing fancy, nothing big, but they needed someone with heart. Guess who got the call? He didn't even believe it at first. He thought it was a joke, but it wasn't. It was a meeting, a sketch test, and a tiny paycheck. He took the job. He stayed up all night drawing, not because he had to, because he wanted to, because for the first time, someone was asking him to create, not survive. And what he made, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished, but it was honest. It was alive. The kids loved it. One drawing became 10. 10 became a mural. Soon his work was all over the clinic. Bright, colorful, full of life, in a place that badly needed it. Parents smiled. Doctors asked questions. And one day, a woman walked in. Publisher. Children's books. She was there visiting her nephew. She saw his work on the wall. She asked who did it. They pointed to him, still in his janitor uniform, still holding a mop. She handed him a card. Said, "Call me if you want to do this for real." He stood there speechless, holding the card like it was a passport to another life. Because it was. And that's how it works sometimes. You show up. You stay humble. You do the work no one sees. And one day, the world sees you back. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens after 1,000 nights you thought didn't matter. But they did. Because when preparation meets opportunity, that's not luck. That's earned. He called her the next day. They talked. They planned. They signed papers. And within months, his first children's book was published, with his name on the cover. Do you understand what that means? The man who once lived in his car, who sketched on trash, who couldn't afford a warm meal, now had a book in bookstores. Not because someone saved him, not because life got easy, but because he kept showing up, even when no one clapped. And that's what I want you to remember. Sometimes the first light looks small, but it's enough to show you the way out of the dark. Just when you start to breathe again, life sometimes reminds you. It still has one more punch left. The book? It was real. It was beautiful. But it didn't sell. Not because it wasn't good. Not because kids didn't love it. Because the publisher? She lied. Promised promotion. Promised royalties. Promised support. But in the contract's fine print, she owned everything. Every sketch. Every word. Every right. He didn't know. He never had a lawyer. He trusted her. And she used him. The book was reprinted without his name. His illustrations credited to someone else. She told him, "There's nothing personal. Just business." He was erased. Again. After everything. After all the nights. After all the hope. After finally believing he was worth something. They took it away. And just like that, he was back where he started. But this time, it hit deeper. Because now he had tasted what it felt like to win. Now he had looked his daughter in the eye and said, "We're okay." And now, he had to tell her the truth. I remember the moment he told me what happened. He didn't cry. He didn't yell. He just sat there. Still. Quiet. Like someone trying not to drown. And I asked him, "What are you gonna do now?" He looked up. And he said something I'll never forget. I told her we're okay. So we will be. Even if I have to start again from nothing. And that's when I knew this man wasn't just strong. He was unbreakable. Because most people, when they get robbed, when they get cheated, when they get crushed by the system, they fold. They walk away. They become bitter. They tell themselves the world isn't fair. And they stop trying. But not him. He filed a lawsuit. He went public. Shared his story with every small outlet that would listen. Talked about being taken advantage of. Talked about fighting back. It didn't happen overnight. But it did happen. The truth came out. And with it came support. Other artists. Parents. Strangers who read his book and said, "Hey, this guy matters." A journalist wrote an article. The article went viral. And suddenly, the world remembered his name. But more importantly, he remembered it too. Because that's the thing about being knocked down. The real test isn't whether you fall. It's whether you rise wiser. Stronger. And this time, he wasn't just drawing for survival. He was drawing with purpose. With fire. With something no contract could ever take away. His voice. There's something different about rising the second time. The first time, you're trying to survive. The second time, you're coming for everything they said you'd never have. He didn't just get back up. He stood taller. After the article went viral, his inbox flooded not with sympathy, but with opportunity. Publishers, studios, nonprofits, all saying the same thing. "We see you now." But he wasn't the same man anymore. This time, he didn't chase offers. He built his own. He launched a small creative studio from scratch. 1 room, 2 folding chairs, and a wall covered in drawings. But it was his. No tricks. No stolen rights. No fine print. He called it Second Story. Because every kid, every person deserves one. He started publishing short illustrated stories online. Raw. Honest. Real. Stories about grief. About hope. About holding on when life goes dark. And people felt it. Because it wasn't polished marketing. It was a man who had lived through hell. Still painting stars into the sky. For others to follow. Parents sent letters. Kids sent drawings. One school printed his stories for their entire library. He hired 2 other artists. Both of them formerly homeless. Then 3 more. Then a team. Within a year. He wasn't just telling his story. He was helping others tell theirs. He didn't become rich. But he became real. And when someone asked him in an interview, "What changed everything for you?" he smiled and said, "The day I stopped trying to be saved and started creating my own way out." That's the shift right there. From victim to voice. From survivor to leader. And the best part? He never lost who he was. He still walked his daughter to school every morning. Still made her lunch with smiley faces on the napkin. Still kept 1 sketchbook just for her. The man who once couldn't afford a home was now building homes inside the hearts of strangers. Through ink and truth and raw, beautiful fight. And if you're sitting there thinking, yeah, but that's just a story, you're wrong. That's a blueprint. That's what happens when a human being decides. You don't get to write the ending of my life. I do. 5 years later. I barely recognized him. Not because he changed, but because he finally became who he always was meant to be. He walked different, not with arrogance, with purpose. Like a man who had fallen to the bottom of life and climbed back up one scar at a time. His studio? It wasn't a studio anymore. It was a movement. Second Story had grown into a full foundation. Mentoring young artists, giving them tools, purpose, hope. Kids who had nothing? Now drawing their pain into power. Single moms who thought their voices didn't matter? Now publishing stories that touched thousands. And at the center of it all was him. Still quiet. Still humble. Still working late nights when no one asked him to. One afternoon I visited him. He wasn't in a suit. He was on the floor, barefoot, helping a 9-year-old paint a dragon, with hands covered in blue and orange. I asked him, "Do you ever think about where you came from?" He looked at me, not with regret, but with peace. "Every single day," he said, "not because it hurts, but because it reminds me what I'm capable of." And that line, that one sentence, it cracked something open in me, because so many of us are trying to forget our past. We run from it, hide it, bury it, but he used it, turned it into foundation, into strength, into purpose. His daughter graduated high school with honors, won a scholarship, stood on a stage and gave a speech that left the room in tears. You know what she said? "My dad didn't just raise me. He showed me how to fight for a life that matters. No spotlight, no red carpet, no applause. But in that room, he was the richest man alive. Because strength isn't measured by what you've gained. It's measured by what you've given. And he gave everything. Not because he had to, but because he could. I told you the story for a reason. Not because it's heartwarming. Not because it's dramatic. Not because it sounds good in a motivational video. But because it's real. Because somewhere out there, maybe right now, there's someone watching this, sitting in their own rock bottom, wondering if they've got anything left. And to that person, I want to say this. You do. You're not broken. You're buried. And buried things? They grow. I watched a man lose everything. Watched him fall and fall again. But I also watched him rise, with nothing but grit, love, and a decision that this is not where my story ends. And here's the truth most people won't tell you. You don't have to be extraordinary to change your life. You just have to refuse to quit. That's it. Not tomorrow. Not when things get easier. Not when the pain fades. Right now. The decision to keep going, to keep walking through the fire, is what separates those who make it from those who let the world write their ending. You write your ending. You decide who you become. And if he could do it. If a man with no money, no home, no help, could turn pain into power, silence into purpose, failure into legacy, then what's stopping you? So yeah, I once knew the strongest man I've ever met. He wasn't on a stage. He wasn't on the screen. He wasn't in the spotlight. He was in the shadows, fighting, rising, and showing the rest of us what strength really looks like. And now, maybe it's your turn.